Okay, so your initial stab at the op-ed was very impressive, both in its thoroughness and the rapidity in turning it around, and that's not for nothing. As you mentioned before, it was good to get it put down onto paper. It felt good to do that. And that's a big part of my writing process. People can do it differently, but I'm a big fan of think about the issue, get a good firm handle on the issue, have some substance there. But as soon as you can, get to writing because I'm of the mind that it's often through our revisions and our continued reappraisals of our work that it gets better. We polish it and polish it as we look it over. And every time we look it over, whether it's a new day or even a new hour, when we revisit that document, we're going to be doing so to some degree with new eyes and new perspectives. And that can always yield fresh results and improvements.
Yeah.
Let's dive into your piece. You gave me a Google Doc, right?
Hmm.
And I looked it over, and I have also the gift at the end of this is that I created a Word doc that I'm going to send you with track changes, and you'll be able to look that over. So I your Google Doc. Forgive me if you wanted me to do that, but I felt like I would be better off sort of making a new doc with Word for you to look at, and you can keep on working in your Google Doc later. But I felt like it was good for me to sort of take it out of there and kind of recast it in a way that is not. And keep in mind, all of my edits, please don't consider them gospel or even strenuously advised, but rather think of them as ideas to ponder and potentially to incorporate and, of course, modify for your own purposes. The edits that I gave, though, I do believe in them. I do believe that they help your paper get better. And so I gave it my best shot. And so take that for what it's worth and use it in creating your own new version. Now, let's dive into this line by line. Let's go through your thought process. Let's figure this out, where we can make improvements and what we might reconsider. So, you went ahead and went with the headline and the photo, which were both that's ambitious and well done. I like that. And of course, the byline has the MD, MPH as part of it, which is good. That's an important signal, the authority signal, although we'll probably want to revisit it in the body as well. And I think your initial draft was on the order of in the mid 400 words. Does that sound right?
I think so.
Yep. So that was a nice number. That's pretty nice and brief. I think I think that what I'll do in the edits is generally shortening some of the prose, but I am suggesting some inclusions of some new elements. So I don't think that we're going to get under 400 words, but I think that's okay. I think that there's some weight to chew on in this idea. You're really taking on a controversial topic that might strike some people right off the bat, incredulously and hopefully willing to read and learn. So we might go over 500, even get closer to 600 words. It's possible it could be there. As long as they're justified, it's an okay approach. So just kind of gave a little bit of harbinger to where I'm going to go in terms of the way you started. Because you think about your topic, and right away, what stands out is this is a topic of significant public import. It's one that's topical. People are thinking about it a lot. And here's the best part: your proposed action is going to be not just controversial, in many ways, it's going to be totally counterintuitive to the bones of the way people are thinking about the issue, right? This is like right up there with, the way that we deal with, alcohol abuse and all of the gangsterism around that in the Prohibition era is to legalize alcohol, right? And this same idea existed with the drug wars. Maybe 10 years ago, the debate was much more pitched than it is now. But this idea of no, the way to deal with marijuana abuse in our community is to decriminalize marijuana, right? And that was something that people could not wrap their heads around. But we're getting there now. And frankly, this might be the argument to be made for all illicit drugs as we move forward. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that what seemed impossible or seemed outrageous now becomes normalized behavior today. If I would have told you 20 years ago, with our federal prisons bursting at the seams with marijuana charges, that most states in the country were going to be legalizing this, and it was even going to be lauded for its health benefits, you might have thought I was crazy. But here we are. Now, you start with the provocative question: bothered by visible drug use in your community, right? Next, do you want to save lives and prevent deaths? Now, not only is the first one in particular provocative, but you're doing one of the old adages, one of the most effective thing in all of sales and persuasion. You might know it formally, or you might just know it intuitively. Do you know what I'm basically referring to? How to get someone primed for being able to entertain a thought that they may be initially resistant to.
No, but it does. My piece does start off like an infomercial. So,
Yep. Yeah. Well, you're getting right at it. What you're doing is you're getting them in the habit of saying yes, right? Do you care about this? Yes. Do you want to prevent the? Yes, right? Okay, now that I've got you in a yes saying mood, now I want to tell you about the things that you would have probably initially said no to, right? And that's a similar thing with an infomercial. Do you care about these children? Do you want to see babies thrive or wherever? Then I start coming up with, well, then what we need to talk about is how you're going to put money into this, which you would have initially been very resistant, right? So I like that idea, and I think that it's a good one here. Now, how could we improve? If I keep that initial concept, because there's a many different ways we could have started it. Of course, well, I talked about it before with anecdotes. We could have talked about it, started it with, really shocking data. We could have shocked it. We could have started it with, talking about a particular model that's been so effective somewhere, how we could bring that here. But you're doing it this way, and I like it. I want to stay with it. So, bothered by visible drug use in your community. Well, that seems like a nice, direct, short question, but we might be able to make it better. What do you think about that?
yeah, I agree. I think all of this can be improved.
Let's talk about that first sentence. What word or words are there, are operative, and we might have other options that may be more powerful?
Bothered,
That's one.
visible,
Yep.
community.
Yeah. I thought community was pretty good. I don't have any thoughts on that one. Um, this was a little bit, you have the first two were really good, right? Um, the third one's not quite as obvious, but it's there. Use,
Use.
drug use, right? What's the problem with use, do you think?
Um, like it's not provocative enough, or
Maybe, right? That's one way to look at it. Here's what the way I was thinking about it. And by the way, this may seem a little reductive or very, I know this might get very minutia, but I'm trying to help. I want to get you in the habit in this respect for thinking about like a popular writer. Rather than, in most cases you're maybe producing academic papers. Provocative writers, this is how do we titillate and stimulate and create action, right? The problem with use is it's so benign, right? It's so neutral. It's vanilla. But we're talking about something that's not that, right? I could add two letters to that word and make it hit in a whole different way.
Users.
That's good. Abuse,
Use.
abuse, right? Drug abuse. That's crucial. Now let's go to visible. Now, from my perspective, bothered didn't hit me immediately. But on second reflection, yeah, that's one that's in play too, right? I don't want to say vexed doesn't sound very good, I guess, but there are others, bothered and troubled. Um, those could be sort of co-equal. But there might be a better word. But before we X bothered, let's go to visible. That's the one I like. Visible. All right. So visible, you're trying to get at the idea of open air drug use, open air drug markets, something that's in your face, right? And that's all good. But the problem is the point that you're trying to make, I bet, is a visceral, emotional, powerful point, right? When you see somebody shooting up on a sidewalk, like that's something that makes you feel some kind of way, right? And that's what you're getting at, isn't it?
Yeah.
But visible is another word that's quite neutral, right? Many good things could be visible, right? What's another word we might want to put there? Because we don't want not just saying that it's visible. In fact, its visibility is not necessarily what's important. What's important is this notion of like lawlessness or intrusiveness or aggressiveness, right? I'm not saying those are the words to use, but those are the points we're trying to make. So I have an idea for a word. What about rampant?
Rampant. Nice.
Bothered by rampant drug abuse in your community? Or bothered by visible drug use in your community? Right? We have a little different tenor to that sentence now, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel really good, really strong about that. Um, on bothered, I think you could play with it, right? Another thing that I would suggest, and this goes against my normal ethos of always trying to trim, right? We're always paring down necessary words. But in this case, we might want to go with are you? And better yet, how about this? Are you, comma, like millions of Americans, bothered by rampant drug abuse in your community, right? What have we done there? Now there's a trade-off here. On the one hand, I've sort of labored what was a nice, sharp English sentence, a question, right? On the one hand, I've elongated it. I've added a couple of commas. Uh, those are things I don't necessarily love, right? So that's the cost. But what's the benefit of what we just did to the beginning of that sentence? There's two.
Like it's
When I say benefit, I mean persuasive tactics.
like it's targeting the reader directly and also bringing in like a commonality with a lot of other people.
Yes, you're exactly right. Excellent, Simon. So first is, and I'll just put it, you're exactly right, but I will just put it in a few, I'll frame it in a few different words that'll help you. I think that'll really reinforce the point and make it even better. Um, Number one is are you. Just the you, right, is a powerful signal. And it is good with a question like this. So when you say you, it's this powerful signal that I am taught. This is for you. This is my letter to you. This is a powerful symbol, right? This is speaking directly to the person. The person is not just reading something on the internet that's impersonal. That you is nice. It doesn't always fit, but it fits here. And then there's probably even more important. If I had to erase one, I'd erase the you. The more important one is the one like millions of Americans. Now you said, I think you said something to the effect of social context. Is that what you said?
Yeah, like other people are also thinking this way. So yeah,
Yes. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm just going to put a label on it. It's called social proof. And it's a super powerful force, right? Every time, just to use an obvious, political thing that everybody can relate to, every time Donald Trump gets up there talking to anybody, what are his favorite words? He loves to say, everybody's saying this, everybody's talking about that, everybody knows this, right? Because he knows this tactic too, and dang it, it is so effective. Even if you're selling garbage, it still works. Unfortunately, we have the added benefit of not selling garbage, but selling a really persuasive point with good solid data to support it. But social proof, millions of Americans know this is a problem. It's a problem. You can go ahead and move off that base, reader. Don't even worry about the validity of this being a problem. Oh, it's a big problem. Keep reading, right? Do you buy that? Do you like that approach?
yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Want to save lives and prevent deaths due to fentanyl overdoses, right? Uh, so yes, right. Of course, we're getting people to say yes. We're getting them into that open view. It looks good. The only thing, let's quibble with the actual words. Want to save lives. I mean, it's of course not a complete sentence, but that's okay. We don't always have to use complete sentences. We can. This isn't a research paper. We can use colloquial terms, and I do it often. I start sentences with "but" quite a bit, right? It's a powerful signal that now we need to move away from the way we were thinking. Want to save lives and prevent deaths due to fentanyl overdoses. Well, there's a redundancy here, right? Save lives and prevent deaths, right? Those both sort of mean the same thing, don't they?
Yeah,
Okay. So maybe we could just, now you could say, well, you're going to do it with the next line. So my guess is this particular line, it may be, it may be superfluous, but it may not. But for now, let's just think about reducing it. How about want to save lives from fentanyl overdoses? That seems to accomplish the same thing as that sentence, but with fewer words. Does it not?
yeah,
Okay. And I chose the active, positive, affirmative one, right? Do I want to think about saving lives or preventing deaths? Well, on the one hand, preventing death is like that's really good, that's really powerful, right? Let's not let these children die, that kind of thing. So death is really an attention getter. But saving lives is sort of more affirmative, more empowering. Let's go with that in this case.
that
Now,
makes sense.
go ahead.
Oh no, that makes sense.
Okay. I love this next line because this is really persuasive. Now, I use this exact convention myself quite frequently, but not very often in text. Do you have any idea how I use this? It's obviously kind of a trick question because you don't know me or what I do, but
Features?
um pardon, speeches? Well, okay, you know what? You're right. That is right. I wasn't going to say that, but that's a point that's right. What I was going to say is that's a favorite tactic when I want to do persuasive media, right?
Uh,
If I want to make a video, right? If I'm making an Instagram reel, what is the kind of thing that I do to get people to stay on and listen to my next point? Well, I tell them something. This is a signal of like, look, I'm smart, you're smart. We think all these things in the world, but I have just discovered light. What if I told you, right? So, so it's a common one. Like for instance, I'll give you an example. You might see this quite. You might see something like this, right? What if I told you the secret to weight loss is, right? They've used it a million times. They'll use it a million more. It keeps working, right? Let's take a more serious, more clinical tone. Cancer is the biggest killer in the world today for our seniors. What if I told you this doesn't have to happen? What if I told you that there's an answer right in front of us? I can't stop, can I? I can't I can't wait for that next word. And so it still works. And it works here in your article, by the way. I like it. I was only doing that to demonstrate kind of the hipness of it. This is a tactic that is very in vogue in the last 20 years. Okay. So what have I told you the best way to both decrease visible? So what I would say is, what have I told you the best way to both decrease drug abuse? Now I take out the visible again. Let's just get rid of the visible, right? And prevent overdose deaths. Oh, and one other thing, um, you know, I could be wrong on this. I don't want to be locked into what I think is the right way or conventions. But for my, I would say no all caps ands and no exclamation points, unless in a very instance we might use an exclamation point. But in general, the all caps and the exclamation point, both of which you're doing to get attention to say, hey, this is big, this is important. I think the reality is in a format like this, in an op-ed piece, I think that what it does, sadly, is it erodes credibility, right? It's just this is going to sound stuffy, and I hate to sound stuffy, but exclamation points and emojis and all caps words, they're not things that physicians do, Simon. I'm sorry. Nor are they things that professional newspaper writers do. Now, maybe that'll change, but for right now, I think we're going to leave that to the teen influencers, and we're going to take a little bit more of a clinical tone. Sound okay?
yeah, it sounds fine.
Great. Okay. And prevent overdose deaths is open overdose prevention centers, right? To open space. Now here you got an M dash, right? Spaces where people can safely use substances and super. Now, I didn't get in there and do a lot of surgery on this. I want to leave that to you. I only want to say about this. And like I said, I'm going to send you a document also that might be helpful. But on this one, I want to say I love the approach. What if I told you? Okay. But this sentence is too long. It's too confusing. Every word you add to a sentence, you're testing my attention span, right? You're running the risk. The longer the sentence gets, it runs a greater risk of losing its central point.
Hmm.
And this one is just too much. And the M dash there, I know what you're doing there. I like M dash use sometimes, but my guess is this is going to have to be a couple of short sentences. Okay. Now, pretty self-explanatory if you think about it, right? Okay, I like that a little bit. I like the idea of what you're saying here is you're basically doing the Thomas Jefferson thing, right? These truths are self-evident, right? You get it, don't you? And implicit is if you don't get it, you're wrong, right? Because it's obvious. Okay, that's what you're saying here. And I like coach. I just wonder if we might massage it just a bit and say something closer to, well, first of all, here's the thing. I guess what I'll do is I'll challenge the central point on this just a little bit, Simon. Is it really self-explanatory? Or, on the contrary, is it a little bit counterintuitive? Right? You're telling me essentially that we should build places for people to use drugs, deadly drugs, and that's going to save lives. I don't think self-explanatory is the way to go on this. I think it could be. I like your idea. The idea of you imply that it's just so obvious you can't resist this argument. I like that. But I think in this case, you're working with different clay. I think this clay is not quite as obvious as that. I think this clay is really about saying, look, there's a way conventionally we thought about this, but now the smarter way is this new way. And I'm a doctor and I have a bunch of data that shows you this is really the way. This is, and by the way, this is not a problem because what else is really in vogue in our society today? It's saying that conventional institutions or ways of thought are wrong, right? Now that there's a lot of good and bad around that. There's a lot of bad things about that, but this is definitely a time of questioning conventional wisdom. And that's what you're doing here. You're not towing the line. You're not being self-explanatory or conventional. You're saying, let's wipe out the past because we're smarter now. And let's not let these poor moral substitutes get in the way of what data says we ought to do. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
So I think that sentence, you might want to say something to that effect, right? I know it's counterintuitive. It's not what we've all been taught, but we know better now. A new generation of physicians, public health experts, and the general public, we just now understand that criminalizing drugs like marijuana, you should throw marijuana in here somewhere, I think, right? Because it's another example of how our thinking has progressed. Okay. So now we can't go line by line on your entire piece. But like I said, I did go line by line basically in the document I'm going to send you so you can have that and work with that. Let's use our last couple of minutes here to talk bigger picture rather than nuts and bolts. Okay. So, bigger picture would be I look at it and I say to myself, I like the data points you brought in. You have one about Contra Costa County opioid overdose deaths. That's a good one. That's a really good one. 60% in the last years. Excellent, right? The Richmond numbers, you might come up with an elegant way of saying, like, we don't have the exact numbers for Richmond, but rest assured they're higher, right? Richmond has, on all of its social metrics, crime, public health, all this data across the board, Richmond is always an outlier in Contra Costa County. This is no different. Okay.
mm,
So, in other words, give me that Contra Costa County data point, which is really bad, right? It's good. It's good that it's really bad. It shows me the big problem. And just say, and don't worry about what Richmond's is, it's worse. Okay. Then around the world, overdose cities. Love it, right? We want examples of the policy working elsewhere. Excellent, right? Decrease in overdose deaths. Okay. Oh, I like this. 35%. Overdose deaths cut almost in half within a decade, right? 2021, first one already. Now this one, I don't want to get into it, but reversed over 1,000 overdoses That's going to require some different language. Okay, I'm sure you probably get that, right? I mean, that's that reverse thing. Like, not only is it opaque, obviously, but it's what we call a speed bump in writing. It's like you read it and you go, wait, what? Reversed? What was? What does he mean exactly by next thing you know, I've lost all the momentum. You need your reader to have momentum. You never want them to stop and like parse a sentence over and over again, right? That's for your professors. You want them to just be led down this path, loving it the whole way and thinking that they're so smart because they're agreeing with it. Then I love this graph where you talk about doesn't just stop overdose deaths, right? Also talking about all these other impacts. You don't need exact data here to list a laundry list of benefits, right? However, however, it might be nice in that graph, in that particular graph, I would love the one that starts with the benefits of overdose prevention centers. I would continue to leave that about as is, not add data points, but it might be nice if you can cite a source somewhere in there, like toward the end, right? It can do, like, in other words, you say they can reduce HIV, reduce petty crime. Um, what else here was it? Result in fewer ambulance overdoses and a whole host of other social benefits, comma. And then if you can say, according to the Centers for Disease Control, that would be great. In this case, you're not going to be able to say it according to them, but if there's somebody, right? If there's a nonprofit think tank or something else, or like a university, USC medicine, whatever, right? If you could, why do you want that? Because it's a data point, not because it's for your bibliography. It's it's sort of another example. It's not social proof, it's authority proof, right? It's another way you're giving it an additional patina of excellence and of institutional knowledge. Okay. Then I would say now you oh, I love this the end of that last. So contrary to popular belief, right? I like that. That's similar to what I was talking about earlier. Um, it's such a key point when you say now this is like a holistic um sort of normative point without data. But you say very nicely here. They also foster trust between healthcare providers and individuals who have blah blah blah, right? That's a bravo, right? That was a excuse me. That was a key point. I really like the way you made that. That was nice. Now, additionally, not lead to increase in crime. Numerous studies have shown that's good language. I like that. Numerous studies have shown, right? And then Vancouver, for instance, saw property. Now, you want to change I said an example would be property crimes plunge by more than 25% within 500 feet of the new OPC, right? Something like that. But that was a good one. Now, what is one thing that we're missing here that would really, really help? I talked about it. I won't press you on this question, but I did mention it in our last meeting, and it will be perfect for this one. And that is, remember when I talked about briefly address only to gentlemanly dispense with the counter arguments, right? And the perfect spot for this would be right after that property crimes part, right? The Vancouver one.
Mm-hmm.
Right after that, I propose you should probably have a sentence there of like, or I mean, a paragraph of like 3 to 4 sentences where you say, look, I understand there are prominent and intelligent people from all walks of life who think this idea is crazy. They can't stand the notion of tax dollars going to a center that promotes safe drug use, right? And we're not even going to let them have the point on whether you can have safe drug use or not. We're going to make the point. We're going to pretend that that's a fait accompli. I know that people think it's crazy to use taxpayer dollars to make it like, while I sympathize with the way they feel and maybe even some of the arguments they've made, the reality is that the data and the use cases leave no doubt that this is a highly effective way to address this crisis. Right? The public, and here's the kicker, the public tax dollars that we use to support a facility like this amounts to barely pennies in comparison to the costly and even ruinous responses that our public health systems now I got too far afoot. That's too long a sentence, but you get the point. Use your own words, right? But the key point is that treatment, that drug use center is pennies compared to the massive outlay of public expenditures of dealing with people sick, dying, committing crimes, all of it. Now, here's one last point on this. I bet you can find a think tank that can come up with a model that's going to give an example. I bet you one will tell you that that to help a drug user get off the drug in this center is going to cost $1, and their lifetime of hospitalizations, crimes, and deaths is going to cost $1,000. I bet you can find one of those, and if you do, cite it. It's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so my point is, you introduce the fact that there are people who disagree with you. You say very briefly on what grounds they disagree, but you say it very briefly, you don't diss them, but you don't make it persuasive either. Then you say that they are well intentioned and they're smart, and it gives me no joy to say that they're wrong, but they're wrong, right? Because of this data, this data, this data. And people really appreciate that, right? If I tell you, look, you, you just don't know what you're talking about, right? I do. I'm smart. You're not. You lose. Do you ever win an argument doing that? Never. But if you say, look, I know that your mom and your dad, they think this particular candidate's a good guy, and I know that they're great Americans and they want what's best for us. But I can't go there because there's too much data that suggests otherwise. That goes a long way. Now, let's see. Oh, so now you bring it back to the point, right? So as Richmond explores ways to deal with the worsening epidemic, overdose prevention centers are logical and compassionate policy response, right? It's time for Richmond to lead with compassion, save lives, and open overdose prevention centers, right? You could also go right back to the beginning and say, you could say something like you could end with, like you, I, a day never goes by that I'm not deeply bothered by the tragic loss of life from this epidemic. Like you, I want to save these lives. And it's clear to me, and I should say it's clear to me, no, it's overwhelmingly clear that treatment centers like this in our community is one of the policy tools we have to consider using, right? Or something like that. Now, there are also, you could do something in the article. You could say something where this is also effective. This one's not quite as important as everything else I've said. It's sort of a take it or leave it because we're getting a little long. But you could do something where you basically say, this isn't a panacea, right? We're not going to solve the whole problem. This is also it's another effective rhetorical tactic. You're saying, look, we're not going to fix the world with this, but it's a step in the right direction, right? So if you want to include something like that, this is only one of the policy tools in a holistic approach, right? But it will work. It won't solve the problem, but it will work, right? If we have the courage and the fortitude and the leadership to make this investment now. So, what am I saying overall, Simon? Overall, I think that you're making a really I look, the beauty is I think you're right. So when you're making the case from the moral and the science high ground, that makes it really easy to do, right? I think you're right. Boom. Awesome. On top of that, I think you have a really excellent op-ed to be able to tell this story. I think it's a great topic because it's one of those where there's like a lot to learn. There's a lot of conventional wisdom to poke through. I love the way you started it. I love the way you have the data points in there. I didn't with everybody else, I've more drastically refashioned it. But with this, with your like rhetorical question, infomercial style at the beginning, I said, let's go with that. The obvious one I thought of in the beginning was, tell me an anecdote, about seeing somebody in the ER or seeing somebody on the sidewalk. Show me what you see through your doctor's eyes. That's what I would have said first, show me your patient. But you went this approach, and I really like it. I think that what you have here is an excellent op-ed. I think if you incorporate just a little bit of what I said, it could be an outstanding op-ed. I think it's really meaty and good, and yeah, I'm excited.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for all of this really helpful feedback. And again, for taking time from your vacation to provide it to me. Did you say you're gonna email me a document with like these suggestions?
Well, yes, I mean it won't be as fulsome as our talk, but
Yeah.
I put notes in all your pieces, and they're generally consistent with what I said. I saw
Cool.
you took some notes too. That's good. Like for instance, like when I said like you might consider a paragraph that's about this isn't a panacea, but it's one of the policy tools that we have to be ready to use. I didn't put that in the document. I just thought of that. And then some other stuff about like the way to construct the opposers, the counter arguments before knocking it down politely. I didn't go into that. I just said like this is where you might want to put in that counter argument.
That makes sense.
But I do think this is an op-ed that really screams for there are millions and millions and millions of good intentioned people who think this is a non-starter. And I think you got to address them not as bad guys, not as idiots, but they just, it's not their fault. But that's the way we've always thought of it, but we know more, we know better now.
Yeah.
And as a doctor, you're always in a great position to make that argument.
Cool. Yeah, I'll get to work on incorporating the feedback, the really helpful feedback that you gave me. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to see your next draft if you want to send it over. If not, that's okay too. I really enjoyed working with you, Simon.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. Like, yeah. Um, I think I've like learned a lot of lessons, not just on this like op-ed, but just in like op-ed writing in general. And it's been really like valuable time to be able to share with you. So yeah, thank you so much for being so generous with your time.
My pleasure, and thanks for being so generous with your time also. I mean, I know, to be a doctor and to, go to do this exercise, right, which is not necessarily part of your medical school curriculum, and then, someone know just, expose it to me and ask me to sort of nitpick it. All of that stuff, requires a lot of character and a lot of strength, and I'm really impressed overall. And this has been really, really great. So thanks again. And I learned a lot from your piece, by the way. And I'm definitely a supporter. And since I work for as an executive in public office, you'll probably be happy to know that me and County Supervisor Joya share your approach on this.
Oh, nice. That's amazing.
All right. Well, I think that's good. And have a great holiday period and make 2024 the best one yet. I'm sure you will.
I'll do my best. Yeah, you as well.
Thank you, Simon. Bye bye.
Have a good one.